The fluorescent lights in the Sterling Media headquarters buzzed overhead as Sarah Chen gathered her belongings into a small cardboard box. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the framed photo of her graduation day on top of her notebooks. She had worked at this company for 3 years, starting right after college, pouring her heart and soul into every project, every presentation, every late night at the office. Marcus Sterling stood in the doorway of her cubicle, arms crossed, his expensive suit perfectly tailored, his expression cold and detached. He was the CEO, the golden boy who had inherited the company from his father and ran it with an iron fist and an ego to match. "You understand this is a business decision," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. Sarah looked up at him, her eyes red but her voice steady. "A business decision? I increased our social media engagement by 40%. I brought in 3 major clients this quarter alone." Marcus shifted his weight, glancing at his watch as if this conversation was merely an inconvenience in his busy schedule. "Look, Sarah, I am going to be honest with you because I think you deserve that much. This company has an image to maintain. Our clients expect a certain level of presentation, a certain aesthetic when they walk through these doors." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What are you saying?" He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You are talented, I will give you that. But talent is not everything in this industry. Our front-facing team needs to represent the brand, and frankly, your appearance does not align with the image we are trying to project. You are just not attractive enough to represent Sterling Media at the level we need." The words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, replaced by a burning sensation of humiliation that spread from her chest to her cheeks. Around them, other employees pretended to focus on their work, but she could feel their eyes, their pity, their relief that it was not them standing in this moment. "That is illegal," she whispered. Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Is it? I am letting you go due to restructuring. That is what the paperwork says. But I wanted to give you the real reason, the truth, so you do not waste time wondering what you did wrong. Take this as advice for your next position. Maybe consider a role that does not require so much client interaction." Sarah picked up her box, holding it against her chest like a shield. She wanted to scream, to throw the box at his smug face, to tell him exactly what kind of person he was. But her throat was tight, and all she could manage was a quiet response. "You are going to regret this." Marcus laughed, actually laughed. "Sure, Sarah, I will lose sleep over letting go of one junior employee. Good luck out there." She walked through the office, past the rows of cubicles and the glass-walled conference rooms, past the receptionist who would not meet her eyes, and out into the parking lot. It was only when she was safely inside her car that she let herself cry, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. That night, Sarah sat in her tiny apartment, staring at rejection emails on her laptop. The humiliation of that afternoon played on repeat in her mind. She looked at herself in the mirror, really looked. She had never considered herself particularly beautiful or ugly. She was just normal. Average height, average build, dark hair usually pulled back in a ponytail, glasses she wore because contacts irritated her eyes. She dressed professionally, but simply. She had never thought her appearance was something that would cost her a career. But Marcus Sterling had made it clear. In his world, in his industry, she was not enough. Sarah made a decision that night. She would not let Marcus Sterling define her worth. She would not let one cruel man destroy everything she had worked for. If the traditional path was closed to her, she would create her own. She spent the next 6 months working 3 jobs to pay her bills while building something of her own. She waitressed in the mornings at a busy diner, where the tips were decent if you could handle the rush. She did freelance graphic design in the afternoons, taking on any project she could find, no matter how small. And she worked on her business plan late into the night, surviving on coffee and determination, mapping out every detail of what would become her company. The waitressing was exhausting. Her feet ached constantly, and she smelled like grease and coffee no matter how many showers she took. But the physical work gave her time to think, to plan, to imagine the future she was building. During slow afternoon shifts, she would sketch logo designs on napkins and draft marketing strategies in the margins of her order pad. The freelance work was inconsistent, but kept her skills sharp. She designed websites for small businesses, created social media graphics for local nonprofits, built portfolios for artists and photographers. Each project was a chance to experiment, to try new techniques, to build a body of work that proved her worth had nothing to do with what Marcus Sterling thought of her appearance. She reached out to old colleagues, people she had worked with who had also left Sterling Media, disillusioned by Marcus and his management style. One of those people was David Park, a brilliant developer who had quit after Marcus had taken credit for his work on a major project. David had spent months building an innovative content management system that had saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars, only to watch Marcus present it to the board as his own idea. Another was Jennifer Martinez, a marketing genius who had been passed over for promotion 5 times in favor of less qualified men. Jennifer had a natural instinct for what made campaigns successful, an ability to tap into cultural moments and create content that resonated. But Marcus had consistently dismissed her ideas, often implementing them later and claiming them as his own insights. Together, they founded Apex Digital Solutions, a media and marketing agency built on the principle that talent mattered more than appearance, that diverse voices made better campaigns, that treating people with respect was not just morally right, but good business. They officially incorporated on a cold January morning, huddled around Sarah's kitchen table with coffee and donuts, signing papers and making promises to each other about the kind of company they would build. The first year was brutal. They worked out of Sarah's apartment, which meant her living room became their office, her kitchen table their conference room, and her bathroom break room. They survived on ramen and determination, taking turns cooking cheap meals and working through nights and weekends. Money was constantly tight. There were weeks when Sarah had to choose between paying her electric bill and buying groceries, weeks when the stress felt like it might crush her. They took on small clients, local businesses that could not afford the big agencies, a family-owned bakery that had been struggling to attract younger customers, a used bookstore that was being squeezed by online retailers, a community center that needed help promoting its programs. These clients could not pay much, but they were willing to give 3 unknowns a chance. But Sarah, David, and Jennifer delivered results that exceeded expectations. The bakery campaign used social media to showcase the artistry of their baking, highlighting the family recipes and traditional techniques. They created short videos of the bakers at work, their hands kneading dough, piping frosting, pulling fresh bread from ancient ovens. Within 3 months, the bakery had lines out the door, especially on weekends. Sales tripled, and the owners cried when they saw their revenue reports. The bookstore campaign focused on creating a destination rather than just a store. They organized author readings, book clubs, children's story hours. They used social media to create a sense of community around the love of reading, sharing customer recommendations and staff picks. The bookstore became a neighborhood gathering place, and while they still couldn't compete with online prices, they offered something more valuable: connection and experience. The Community Center campaign highlighted the programs that changed lives. They interviewed seniors who found friendship in exercise classes, kids who discovered talents in art programs, adults who learned new skills in job training workshops. The emotional storytelling brought in new donations and increased participation in programs across the board. Word spread, slowly at first, then faster. Apex Digital Solutions developed a reputation for being innovative, responsive, and effective. They were the agency that actually listened to clients, that delivered on promises, that treated every project like it mattered, because to them, it did. By the end of the second year, they had moved into a real office space, a modest suite in a building that had seen better days, but was affordable and gave them room to grow. They hired 5 employees, carefully selecting people who shared their values and brought diverse perspectives. Each hire was deliberate, chosen not just for skills, but for character and cultural fit. Sarah remembered interviewing their first employee, a young designer named Alex, who had been rejected from multiple positions at bigger agencies. Alex was incredibly talented, but had visible tattoos and an alternative style that made traditional agencies uncomfortable. Sarah hired them on the spot, recognizing in Alex some of her own experience of being judged for superficial reasons. By the end of the third year, they had 20 employees and clients across 3 states. The office was buzzing with energy, filled with people who genuinely enjoyed working together. They had birthday celebrations and team lunches, inside jokes and collaborative projects. It was everything Sarah had wished Sterling Media could have been. Sarah worked harder than she ever had, but it was different now. She was building something that mattered, surrounded by people who valued her for her mind and her work ethic, not her appearance. There were still hard days, still moments of doubt and stress and fear, but there was also purpose, fulfillment, the deep satisfaction of creating something valuable from nothing. In the 4th year, Apex Digital Solutions landed its first major corporate client, a tech startup that had received significant venture capital funding and needed to establish its brand. The startup had interviewed 3 bigger, more established agencies before choosing Apex. When Sarah asked why they had selected her team, the founder had been direct. "Your portfolio speaks for itself, but more than that, your team gets it. You understand that branding is not just about looking good. It is about authenticity, connection, telling a story that matters. The other agencies gave us slick presentations full of buzzwords and empty promises. You gave us a strategy that made sense and a team that actually listened to what we wanted to achieve." The campaign they created for the tech startup was a masterpiece of storytelling. Instead of focusing on technical specifications and features, they highlighted the human problems the technology solved. They created a series of short documentaries featuring real users whose lives had been improved by the product. The emotional resonance was powerful, and the campaign went viral in ways that purely technical marketing never could have. The campaign won 2 industry awards. Suddenly, Apex Digital Solutions was not just another small agency. They were players in the game, recognized innovators who had proven that heart and authenticity could drive results as effectively as big budgets and flashy productions. Sarah stood in their new expanded office space, looking out over the city, and allowed herself a moment of pride. She had done this. They had done this. Without Marcus Sterling, without his approval, without fitting into his narrow definition of success. She thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, waitressing and living on ramen, and marveled at how far she had come. Jennifer walked up beside her, holding 2 coffee cups and offering one to Sarah. "You know Sterling Media is struggling, right?" Jennifer said, a slight smile on her face. Sarah took the coffee, the warmth seeping into her hands. "I heard something about that. Lost 3 major clients in the past 6 months. Word is that Marcus has been burning bridges left and right. Turns out treating people like garbage catches up with you eventually. I heard their best creative team quit last month to start their own thing, and their head of client relations took 2 of their biggest accounts with her when she left." Sarah said nothing, but she filed that information away. She felt no joy in Marcus's struggles, but there was a certain vindication in knowing that his approach to business and people had proven unsustainable. You could only succeed by stepping on others for so long before it all collapsed. The 5th year brought the opportunity that would change everything. Sterling Media, once the dominant force in the industry, had fallen on hard times. Marcus's leadership style, which had seemed bold and decisive in good times, proved disastrous when challenges arose. He had alienated clients with his arrogance, driven away talented employees with his cruelty and credit stealing, and made a series of expensive strategic mistakes. He had invested heavily in platforms and technologies that failed, ignored emerging trends that his more experienced team members had warned him about, and treated every setback as someone else's fault. The board of directors had finally had enough. After the company posted losses for 3 consecutive quarters and lost nearly 40% of its client base, they held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Marcus as CEO. It was a humiliating fall for someone who had always believed his name and pedigree made him untouchable. Sarah received a call from Richard Sterling, Marcus's father and the company's founder. He had retired years ago, but still held a significant stake in the company. Richard had built Sterling Media from nothing, starting in his garage with 1 client and growing it into an industry leader through decades of hard work, integrity, and genuine care for both clients and employees. Watching his son destroy that legacy had been painful. "Miss Chen, I hope you remember me." His voice was warm but tired. "We met a few times before I retired." "I remember, Mr. Sterling." Sarah did remember. Richard had always been kind to her during her time at the company, asking about her projects and offering. She had often wondered if he knew how his son treated people. "I am calling because I need help. Sterling Media needs help. The board has voted to remove Marcus as CEO. We need new leadership, someone who understands the industry, who has proven they can build success from the ground up, who can restore a reputation. Your name keeps coming up. I have been following what you have built with Apex. It is impressive, truly impressive. You have the vision and the integrity we need." There was a pause, and when Richard spoke again, his voice was heavy with regret. "I also know my son treated you poorly. I found out about that after you left, and I was appalled. I tried to reach out to apologize, but I understand why you did not return my calls. This is a chance to make that right, not just for you, but for everyone who has been hurt by poor leadership. This is a chance to save jobs and rebuild something valuable." Sarah was silent for a long moment, processing. The company that had rejected her, that had told her she was not good enough, was now asking her to lead it. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked carefully. "The CEO position, full operational control, a seat on the board, significant compensation and equity, the resources to implement your vision for the company. I have seen what you value, how you treat people, the culture you have built at Apex. That is what Sterling Media needs." "I need to think about it," Sarah said finally. "Of course, take the time you need. But Sarah, I hope you will consider it, not for revenge, but because you can save a lot of jobs and rebuild something valuable. There are over 200 people still working at Sterling Media. Good people who do not deserve to lose their livelihoods because of one man's failures." After she hung up, Sarah sat in her office for hours, thinking. The offer was tempting on multiple levels. The salary alone would change her life. The prestige of running a company like Sterling Media would cement her reputation in the industry. And yes, there was a certain poetic justice to the idea of returning as the boss of the man who had fired her. But Sarah had built Apex on principles, not ego. She needed to make sure this decision aligned with those principles. David and Jennifer came in together, having clearly been filled in on the situation. "Are you going to do it?" David asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Sarah looked at them, these people who had believed in her when no one else did. Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell, to let Sterling Media collapse under the weight of Marcus's failures, to enjoy watching the company that rejected me fail. "And the other part?" Jennifer prompted. "The other part knows there are good people still working there, people who do not deserve to lose their jobs because of one man's ego. And maybe, this is how you really win. Not by watching your enemy fail, but by succeeding so completely that you end up in a position to show them what real leadership looks like." "What about Apex?" David asked. "This is our baby. We built this together." Sarah had been thinking about that. "We keep Apex independent. That is non-negotiable. Jennifer, you would take over as CEO here. David, you would be COO. We have an amazing team that can keep growing this company. I would maintain ownership, but step back from day-to-day operations. Apex does not need me anymore. It is strong enough to thrive on its own. But Sterling Media is broken. It needs someone to fix it." Jennifer leaned forward. "And what about Marcus? What happens to him?" Sarah smiled slightly. "That is the interesting part. I have a condition that might surprise you." 3 weeks later, Sarah Chen walked through the doors of Sterling Media headquarters as the new CEO. The announcement had sent shockwaves through the industry. Trade publications ran features analyzing the move, calling it everything from poetic justice to a risky gambit. Online forums buzzed with speculation about what this meant for the company's future. The buzz in the office was electric, everyone wondering what this meant for their futures. Sarah had negotiated her contract carefully. She would maintain ownership of Apex Digital Solutions, which would continue to operate independently under Jennifer's leadership. She would have full operational control of Sterling Media with minimal board interference. And she had one non-negotiable demand that had caused significant debate. Marcus Sterling would remain on staff in a junior position, reporting to someone else, for a minimum of 6 months. Richard Sterling had hesitated at that last part. "Are you sure?" he had asked. "I thought you would want him gone entirely. Honestly, most people would." "No," Sarah had replied firmly. "He needs to understand what he did. He needs to see what happens when you lead with respect instead of cruelty. And honestly, despite everything, he does have some talent. He just needs to learn." Humility. If I fire him, he learns nothing. He just becomes a victim in his own mind, someone who was treated unfairly. But if he stays, if he has to work under someone else's leadership, if he has to earn his place instead of handed to him, maybe he grows. Maybe he becomes better. Richard had studied her for a long moment. You are either very wise or very forgiving. Maybe a bit of both. Or maybe I just understand that broken systems create broken people, and fixing the system means giving people a chance to heal and grow. On her first day, Sarah called an all-staff meeting. She stood at the front of the main conference room, looking out at faces that ranged from hopeful to skeptical to openly hostile. Some people remembered her from 5 years ago and were shocked to see her return in this capacity. Others had only heard stories. Many were simply terrified about what leadership change meant for their job security. She saw Marcus in the back, his face carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the clench of his jaw. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of power and status. "I know many of you are uncertain about this change," Sarah began, her voice calm and clear. "Some of you remember me from 5 years ago. Some of you have only heard stories. I want to be clear about what I am here to do. I am here to rebuild. Sterling Media was once a leader in this industry, and it can be again. But that requires change. It requires us to value every person in this organization, to recognize that our strength comes from our collective talent and diverse perspectives, not from fitting some narrow mold of what success looks like." She paused, letting her words sink in. She could see people beginning to relax slightly, hope starting to replace fear in their expressions. "I am not here for revenge. I am not here to settle scores. I am here because this company has potential, and you, all of you, have potential. What I expect is excellence, integrity, and mutual respect. What you can expect from me is fair treatment, honest communication, and leadership that values your contributions. Over the next few weeks, I will be meeting with each of you individually. I want to hear your ideas, your concerns, your vision for what this company can be. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but I believe we can do it together." The meeting ended with cautious optimism. People filed out slowly, some stopping to introduce themselves, others hanging back watchfully. Sarah shook hands, remembered names, asked questions. She could feel the culture of fear that Marcus had created, the way people hesitated before speaking, tested their words before committing to them. Marcus was one of the last to leave. As he passed Sarah, she spoke quietly. "Mr. Sterling, I would like to see you in my office in 15 minutes. He nodded stiffly and left without a word. When Marcus entered Sarah's office, which had been his office just weeks before, he looked uncomfortable in a way she had never seen. The confident, arrogant man who had fired her was nowhere in evidence. In his place was someone who looked tired and diminished, uncertain of his place in the world. His expensive suit seemed too big now, as if he had lost weight from stress. "Please, sit down," Sarah said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. The same chair where she had sat 5 years ago while he destroyed her confidence and career prospects. Marcus sat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He would not quite meet her eyes. I want to establish something from the start, Sarah continued. I am not interested in humiliating you. That is not why I asked for you to remain on staff. Do you know why you are still here? Marcus shook his head slowly, finally looking up at her. Because despite what you did to me, despite your terrible leadership and worse judgment, you have skills that this company needs. You understand the technical side of media production better than almost anyone. Your problem was never lack of talent. It was lack of character. Marcus flinched at that, but said nothing. His jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might argue, might defend himself. But he stayed silent. You are going to work under Jennifer Cho in the production department. You will report to her, you will follow her direction, and you will treat her and everyone else on that team with respect. Jennifer is one of the people you drove away from this company 5 years ago by taking credit for her work. She built a successful career despite your attempts to hold her back, and now she is returning as head of production because I asked her to fix this place. Sarah leaned forward slightly, her voice firm but not cruel. You are going to learn what it feels like to be judged solely on your work, not your name or your connections or your appearance. And if you can do that, if you can show growth and humility, there might be a future for you. Here. But it will be a future you earn, not one you inherit. Your father built something valuable. You damaged it. Now you have a chance to help rebuild it, but only if you can check your ego at the door. She paused, looking at him directly. I also want you to understand something else. What you did to me 5 years ago was cruel and illegal. You used your position of power to hurt someone based on their appearance. You damaged my confidence, my career prospects, my sense of self-worth. You did it casually, like it did not matter, like I did not matter. Do you have any idea what that did to me? For the first time, Marcus met her eyes fully. His voice, when he spoke, was barely above a whisper. No. I did not think about it. I just saw you as an obstacle to the image I wanted for the company. I did not see you as a whole person with feelings and dreams. I saw you as a problem to be solved. Exactly. You saw me as an object, not a person. That is what I need you to understand. Every person in this organization is a person with feelings, with dreams, with value that has nothing to do with how they look or where they came from. If you cannot grasp that, then you have no place here, and frankly, no place in any leadership role anywhere. Marcus was silent for a long moment, his eyes downcast. Then, quietly, he said, I am sorry. I know that does not fix anything. I know it does not undo what I did or how I made you feel, but I am sorry. These past few weeks, losing everything, watching the company my father built crumble because of my choices, it has given me a lot of time to think about who I have been and who I want to be. Sarah studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. Time will tell if you mean that. For now, report to Jennifer at 8 tomorrow morning. She will outline your responsibilities and expectations. Dismissed. After Marcus left, Sarah allowed herself to lean back in her chair and take a deep breath. The satisfaction she thought she might feel was not there. Instead, there was just a sense of purpose, of a job that needed doing. She did not feel triumphant, she felt determined. The next 6 months were the most intense of Sarah's professional life. She worked 16-hour days, meeting with clients to reassure them about the leadership change, sitting down with employees to understand the company culture and identify problems, restructuring departments to maximize efficiency and collaboration, and slowly rebuilding Sterling Media's reputation in the industry. She brought in some key people from Apex to help with the transition. Alex, their first hire, came on to revamp the entire visual identity of the company, creating something fresh and modern that still honored Sterling Media's history. A few other Apex team members joined temporarily to help implement new systems and processes. Sarah implemented new policies around workplace respect and diversity. She created clear reporting mechanisms for harassment and discrimination. She mandated unconscious bias training for all employees, especially those in hiring and management positions. She personally reviewed the company's hiring and promotion practices and found exactly what she suspected: a pattern of discrimination and favoritism that had nothing to do with actual performance. The data was damning. Over the past 5 years under Marcus's leadership, promotions had gone overwhelmingly to people who fit a certain demographic profile. Performance reviews showed consistent patterns of women and people of color receiving lower ratings for the same quality of work. Hiring decisions showed clear bias toward candidates from certain schools and backgrounds. Sarah fixed it, methodically and systematically. She promoted people who had been overlooked, some of whom had been waiting years for recognition of their contributions. She brought in new talent from diverse backgrounds, actively recruiting from schools and programs that Marcus had ignored. She made it clear that at Sterling Media under her leadership, what mattered was what you could do, not what you looked like or who you knew. The changes were not universally popular. Some people who had thrived under the old system resented the new one. A few senior employees left, unable or unwilling to adapt to a culture that no longer rewarded them simply for fitting in. Sarah let them go without regret, knowing that building the culture she wanted meant some people would self-select out. But most employees embraced the changes. Morale improved dramatically. People started taking creative risks again, sharing ideas without fear of having them stolen or dismissed. Collaboration increased as the competitive, backstabbing culture Marcus had fostered gave way to something healthier. Marcus, to Sarah's genuine surprise, kept his head down and did his work. Jennifer reported that he was professional, competent, and surprisingly humble. He took direction without complaint, worked late when needed, and slowly began to earn the respect of his colleagues through actual contribution rather than his name. He stopped talking about his ideas and started listening to others. He credited his team members in meetings instead of taking glory for himself. He admitted when he did not know something instead of pretending expertise he did not have. Jennifer pulled Sarah aside one day, 3 months into the transition. "I did not think I would ever say this, but Marcus is actually becoming a decent colleague. He still has moments where the old ego flares up, but he catches himself now. He apologized to me last week for taking credit for my campaign idea 5 years ago. I never thought I would hear that." "People can change," Sarah said. "Not always, and not easily, but they can. Especially when circumstances force them to confront who they have been." 4 months into Sarah's tenure, they landed a major client that had specifically asked for Sterling Media because they had heard about the culture change. The client was a progressive foundation that had been looking for an agency to handle their national awareness campaign. They had been prepared to work with one of the bigger, more established firms until they read an article about Sarah's turnaround of Sterling Media. "We want to work with a company that shares our values," the foundation director said during their pitch meeting. "We have seen too many agencies talk about diversity and inclusion in their marketing while practicing something entirely different internally. Your story, what you are building here, that authenticity matters to us." Sterling Media won the account, and it was a turning point. More clients followed, drawn by the combination of talent and values. Employees who had been looking for exits decided to stay, excited by the direction the company was heading. The buzz in the industry shifted from pity and schadenfreude to respect and interest. Trade publications started reaching out for interviews. Sarah was featured in a major business magazine article about leadership and company turnarounds. She was invited to speak on panels about workplace culture and overcoming adversity. Each opportunity was a chance to spread the message that business success and ethical treatment of people were not opposing goals, but complementary ones. One evening, Sarah was working late, reviewing budgets and projections, when she heard a knock on her office door. It was Marcus. "Do you have a minute?" he asked hesitantly, standing in the doorway like he was not sure he had the right to enter. Sarah gestured for him to come in. She noticed that he looked different. Not just the obvious loss of authority, but something deeper. He seemed more grounded, more present, less like he was performing confidence, and more like he was actually feeling it in a healthy way. Marcus sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I wanted to talk to you about something. My 6-month probation period is almost up." "It is," Sarah confirmed, curious where this was going. "I know you have the option to let me go at that point. The board wanted you to. They wanted me gone entirely from the start. And I would understand if you did let me go. I have given you every reason to. But I wanted to ask if I could stay. Not because of my name, not because of my father, but because I think I can contribute. I have learned a lot in these months. About leadership, about respect, about what really matters." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. His hands were clasped tightly, and Sarah could see genuine vulnerability in his expression. "I also wanted to really apologize. Not a corporate apology, not something my lawyer told me to say, but a real one. What I did to you was unforgivable. I was arrogant, cruel, and blind to my own privilege. I thought success meant stepping on people, that power meant never showing weakness, that my name and background made me better than everyone else. I destroyed something in you that day, or tried to, and the fact that you overcame it, that you built something incredible despite what I did, that does not absolve me. I cannot undo the pain I caused, but I want you to know that I see it now. I understand what I did and why it was wrong. I am genuinely sorry, and I want to spend the rest of my career proving that I can be better." Sarah listened, watching his face carefully. She had imagined this moment many times over the past 5 years. In some versions, she unleashed all her anger, made him feel every bit of the pain he had caused her. In others, she coldly dismissed him, enjoying the power reversal. She had fantasized about watching him beg and then rejecting him anyway, just so he could feel a fraction of the powerlessness she had felt. But sitting here now, looking at someone who genuinely seemed to have grown, who had learned hard lessons through humility and hard work, she felt something different. Not forgiveness, exactly, but perhaps the beginning of it. "I appreciate your apology," she said finally. "And I have been watching your work. Jennifer speaks highly of you. The team respects you. You have shown growth. But I need you to understand something. You do not get credit for learning to treat people with basic human decency. That should be the baseline, not an achievement." "I know," Marcus said quickly. "I am not asking for a medal. I am just asking for a chance to keep doing better." "That said," Sarah continued, "there is a place for you here, if you want it. Not as CEO, not in any position of significant power over others, at least not for a long time, but as a senior producer, using your technical skills, mentoring junior staff, contributing to this company as a member of the team rather than its ruler. Can you handle that?" "Yes," Marcus said immediately. "Absolutely. I do not need power. I thought I did, but these past months have taught me that I am happier just doing good work with good people. The ego, the status, the need to be on top, it made me miserable. I was so worried about how people saw me that I never stopped to think about who I actually was. Then we will draw up a new contract. But Marcus, if I ever see you treating anyone the way you treated me, if I ever hear about you abusing your position or making anyone feel lesser because of how they look or where they come from, you are done. Not just here, but I will make sure the entire industry knows. Do you understand?" "I understand, and you would not have to. I will never be that person again. I have seen what real leadership looks like now. I have seen what happens when you build people up instead of tearing them down. There is no going back from that." After Marcus left, Sarah sat alone in her office, looking out at the city lights. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago, crying in her car in this very parking lot. She thought about all the nights spent building Apex, all the doubts and fears and moments when she wanted to give up. She thought about the rage she had carried, the desire for revenge that had burned in her chest during those darkest days. She had not just survived, she had thrived. And now she was using her success not for revenge, but to build something better, to create the kind of workplace that did not crush people for superficial reasons, but lifted them up for their contributions. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Just landed the Peterson account. They specifically mentioned wanting to work with you. Said they respect what you are building here. We are killing it." Sarah smiled and typed back a response. Then she gathered her things and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that leading with integrity was not just morally right, but strategically smart. A year after Sarah took over as CEO, Sterling Media had its most profitable quarter in 5 years. They had been featured in 3 major industry publications for their innovative campaigns and workplace culture. Sarah had been invited to speak at conferences about leadership and rebuilding organizational culture. The company had won back 2 of the major clients they had lost under Marcus's leadership and had signed several new high-profile accounts. She stood on stage at one of those conferences, looking out at hundreds of faces, and shared her story. Not for sympathy, not for attention, but because she knew there were others out there who had been told they were not enough, who had been judged for things that had nothing to do with their abilities. 5 years ago, I was fired for being too ugly, she said, and the audience gasped audibly. The shock rippled through the room like a physical wave. Those were not the official words, of course. The paperwork said restructuring. But my boss told me directly that my appearance did not fit the company image, that I was not attractive enough to represent the brand. She paused, letting the shock and outrage settle. She could see people leaning forward, fully engaged now. I tell you this not to embarrass my former boss, who has since apologized and is now working productively at the company I now lead. I tell you this because discrimination based on appearance is real. It is damaging, and it is often dismissed or ignored. We talk about discrimination based on race, gender, age, and those conversations are crucial. We need to keep having them. But we do not talk enough about lookism, about the way we judge people's professional worth based on their physical appearance. We do not talk enough about how we exclude talented, capable people because they do not fit some arbitrary aesthetic standard. She went on to describe the research she had done while building Apex and rebuilding Sterling Media. Studies showed that attractive people earned on average 12% more than their less attractive counterparts. That tall men were disproportionately represented in executive roles. That women who did not conform to conventional beauty standards faced significant barriers to advancement. That weight discrimination was one of the last socially acceptable forms of bias in the workplace. But here is what those studies miss, Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength. They miss the talent we lose when we judge books by their covers. They miss the innovations that never happen because brilliant minds are shut out of rooms where decisions are made. They miss the cost to human dignity when we tell people that their worth is determined by factors they often cannot control. She talked about building Apex, about the principles she had used to create a company where talent and character mattered more than appearance. She talked about returning to Sterling Media and finding a culture poisoned by discrimination and favoritism. She talked about the systematic changes she had implemented, the resistance she had faced, and the results that proved her approach worked. In the years since I took over Sterling Media, we have increased revenue by 38%. We have improved employee retention by 52%. Our employee satisfaction scores have tripled. We have won back lost clients and gained new ones. And we did it by valuing people for who they are and what they can do, not how they look. She shared specific examples. A brilliant analyst who had been passed over for promotion repeatedly because she was overweight had been promoted to Director of Insights and had since developed a market research methodology that had become a competitive advantage. A talented designer who dressed in a way that previous leadership considered too alternative had led their most successful rebranding campaign. A developer with a visible facial scar who had been kept away from client-facing roles had turned out to be their best client relations person because of his genuine empathy and communication skills. These people were always talented, Sarah said. They were always capable, but they were being held back by a culture that valued the wrong things. When we changed the culture, their talent could finally shine. The speech ended with a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she looked out at the crowd, knowing that somewhere in that audience were people who needed to hear her story, who needed to know that being judged and rejected for superficial reasons did not define their worth or limit their potential. Afterward, dozens of people approached her. A young woman with a port wine stain birthmark on her face talked about being told to wear more makeup to job interviews. A man in a wheelchair described being consistently underestimated despite his impressive qualifications. A woman with alopecia shared how she had been asked to wear a wig to work at her previous company. An older professional talked about being pushed out of the industry because he no longer fit the young, hip image his company wanted. Sarah listened to each one, offered encouragement, and collected business cards. Some of them would end up working for Sterling Media or Apex. All of them left feeling a little less alone, a little more validated in their experiences, a little more hopeful about their futures. That evening, Sarah returned to her hotel room exhausted but energized. She ordered room service and sat by the window, looking out at the unfamiliar city and reflecting on how far she had come. Her phone rang. It was her mother, who had watched the conference live stream. "I am so proud of you," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know how hard that day was when you were fired. I remember you calling me, barely able to speak through the tears. I remember worrying that you might not recover from that blow. But look at you now. Look at what you have built." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Thanks, Mom. There were so many times I wanted to give up. So many nights when I thought maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I really was not enough." "He was never right," her mother said fiercely. "He was cruel and wrong, and I am glad he has had to face the consequences of that cruelty. But Sarah, what makes me most proud is not that you proved him wrong. What makes me proud is that you used your pain to create something that helps other people. You turned your worst moment into a mission to make sure others do not have to experience what you did." After they hung up, Sarah sat for a long time, processing. Her mother was right. Somewhere along the journey, her motivation had shifted from proving Marcus wrong to building something right. The revenge she had imagined in those early days had transformed into something more meaningful, the creation of workplaces where people like her, people who didn't fit conventional molds, could thrive. 2 years into her tenure as CEO, Sarah was sitting in her office when her assistant buzzed. "Richard Sterling is here." Sarah smiled. Richard had become a mentor and friend, checking in regularly and offering advice when asked, but never interfering. Their relationship had evolved into something genuine, built on mutual respect and shared values. "Send him in." Richard entered, looking healthier and happier than she had ever seen him. Retirement clearly suited him. He spent his time now volunteering, traveling with his wife, and watching with pride as Sarah restored his life's work to its former glory and beyond. "Sarah, I just came from a board meeting," Richard said, settling into a chair with the ease of someone completely comfortable. "They asked me to talk to you about something." "Okay, what is it?" "They want to make your position permanent and offer you a significant equity stake in the company. They are also proposing to rename the company, Sterling Chen Media. Half the board wanted Chen Sterling, but I told them you should have top billing. You have done more for this company in 2 years than anyone else has done in 20. Sarah felt her eyes widen. "Richard, I do not need my name on the building." "I know you do not. That is part of why they want to do it. But they want to recognize what you have built here, how you have transformed this company. It is not just about revenue, though that has been impressive. It is about reputation, culture, the way other companies in the industry now look to us as an example. Your name carries weight now. People trust you. That trust is valuable. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing. What does Marcus think about this? Richard smiled, a warm, genuine expression. He was at the meeting. He voted for it enthusiastically. Said it was long overdue recognition for what you have accomplished. He told the board that having his name come second to yours was appropriate, and that he hoped someday to earn a place in a company that good. I have to tell you, Sarah, I never thought I would see my son show that kind of humility. Whatever you did, however you handled him, it worked. You gave him something I never could, a reason to grow beyond his privilege and ego. That means a lot, Sarah said softly. I was not sure if keeping him on was the right decision. Part of me worried I was being too forgiving, that I should have just cut him loose completely. No, Richard said firmly. You were wise. Firing him would have been the easy choice, the satisfying choice in the moment. But you understood something important. Broken people need a chance to heal. And the best way to heal someone who has abused power is to show them what it feels like to be powerless, and then give them a path back through merit and growth. Marcus is a better person now because you gave him that chance. And this company is better because you kept someone with genuine technical talent and taught him how to use it properly. That afternoon, Sarah walked through the office, observing her team at work. The transformation over the past 2 years had been remarkable. In the production bay, Marcus was working with 2 junior producers, patiently explaining a complex editing technique. She watched as he encouraged them to try something, then gently corrected their approach, giving specific, constructive feedback. The old Marcus would have grabbed the controls and done it himself, taking credit for the final product. This Marcus was teaching, mentoring, building up the next generation. In the marketing department, a diverse team of creatives was brainstorming campaigns. The meeting was loud, chaotic, full of energy. People interrupted each other in excitement, built on each other's ideas, laughed at failed concepts without fear of judgment. Sarah could see people of different ages, ethnicities, body types, and styles all contributing equally. A woman in a hijab was pitching an idea while a man with visible tattoos sketched it out on the whiteboard. An older professional was offering perspective based on decades of experience, while a recent college graduate suggested a fresh approach to social media. In the break room, employees from different departments mingled and laughed together. Sarah saw the analyst who had been promoted after years of being overlooked sharing lunch with a group of younger employees, mentoring them through their career questions. The designer with the alternative style was showing photos from a recent art show to colleagues who genuinely wanted to see their work. The developer with the facial scar was planning a team outing, and people were enthusiastically signing up. This was what she had built. Not a revenge fantasy, not a story of crushing her enemies, but something better. A place where people were valued for who they were and what they could do. Where leadership meant service rather than domination. Where success was measured not just in profits, but in the dignity and growth of every person in the organization. Sarah felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to find Alex, the first employee she had hired at Apex years ago. Alex had come to Sterling Media.
And had decided to stay permanently. Penny for your thoughts? Alex asked, their colorful sleeve tattoos visible beneath rolled-up sleeves. Just reflecting on how far we have come. 2 years ago, this place was toxic. Now look at it. Alex nodded, looking around with obvious pride. You know what I love most? People are not afraid anymore. They are not constantly looking over their shoulders, wondering if they are about to be humiliated or fired for some arbitrary reason. They can just do their work and be themselves. That evening, Sarah met David and Jennifer for dinner to celebrate. They gathered at a small Italian restaurant they had discovered during the early days of Apex, when it was all they could afford. Even though they could easily afford expensive restaurants now, they still returned to this place regularly, a reminder of where they had started. So, Sterling Chen Media, Jennifer said, raising her glass of wine, has a nice ring to it. It feels surreal, Sarah admitted. 5 years ago, I was being escorted out of that building with my belongings in a box. 3 years ago, I was waitressing to pay rent while trying to build Apex in my spare time. Now they want to put my name on one of the biggest media companies in the industry. You earned it, David said firmly. You did not just get revenge. You showed everyone what real leadership looks like. You made that company better. You gave Marcus a chance to become better. And you proved that success and ethics are not opposing forces. That is bigger than revenge. That is transformation. Sarah thought about David's words as she sipped her wine. He was right. Somewhere along the journey, her goal had shifted from proving Marcus wrong to proving that a better way was possible. She had stopped thinking about what Sterling Media had taken from her and started thinking about what she could build there. Remember when we signed the incorporation papers for Apex? Sarah asked. We were sitting around my kitchen table eating day-old donuts, terrified that we were making a huge mistake. I remember thinking we were absolutely insane, Jennifer laughed. 3 people with no business experience, no funding, no clients, trying to compete with established agencies. But we believed in something. We believed that there was a better way to do this work. And we were right, David added. Apex is thriving. Sterling Media is thriving. We proved that you do not have to sacrifice your values to succeed. If anything, having strong values makes you more successful because people want to work with and for organizations that treat them with respect. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Marcus had not fired me? Sarah asked quietly. If I had just stayed at Sterling Media, kept my head down, worked my way up slowly through the ranks. Jennifer shook her head. You would have left eventually. That culture was toxic. It would have crushed your spirit or driven you away. Getting fired, as awful as it was in the moment, freed you to build something better. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us redirect us toward better paths. Sarah nodded slowly. I think you are right. If I had stayed, I would have become smaller, less confident, constantly trying to fit into a mold that was never designed for someone like me. Getting rejected forced me to create my own path. And look what you created, David said. 2 successful companies, hundreds of jobs, a new standard for workplace culture. And you gave someone who hurt you a chance to grow and change. That is a legacy, Sarah. 3 years into Sarah's tenure, Sterling Chen Media, as it was now officially known, was recognized as one of the best places to work in the industry. The accolades poured in. Best company culture, most innovative agency, top employer for diversity and inclusion. Each award was validation that the principles she had fought for actually worked in practice, not just in theory. They had expanded into new markets, opening offices in 3 new cities. Each office was built on the same cultural foundation: talent over appearance, respect over hierarchy, collaboration over competition. Sarah personally oversaw the hiring of leadership for each new location, making sure they understood and embraced the company values. They had also launched a fellowship program for young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds, providing mentorship, training, and a pathway into the industry for people who might not have traditional access. The program accepted 20 fellows each year, and the first cohort had just graduated. 19 of the 20 had received job offers, either from Sterling Chen Media or from other companies that had been impressed by their portfolios. Sarah stood at the annual company meeting, looking out at an organization that barely resembled the one she had joined 8 years ago as a junior employee. The crowd had tripled in size. People of all backgrounds, body types, ages.
And appearances filled the room. She saw employees in wheelchairs and employees who wore hearing aids. She saw people with visible tattoos and people in traditional religious dress. She saw every shade of skin color, every variety of human appearance, united not by conformity but by talent and commitment. We have had an incredible year, Sarah began. Our revenue is up 45%. We have opened 3 new offices. We have won 8 major industry awards.
We have been named one of the best places to work for the third year in a row. These are accomplishments we should all be proud of." The room erupted in applause. Sarah waited for it to die down before continuing. "But I want to take a moment to talk about why we have been successful. It is not just because we are talented, though we are. It is not just because we work hard, though we do. It is because we have built a culture that values every person, that recognizes that our differences make us stronger, that understands dignity and respect are not optional values, but fundamental requirements for success." She paused, her voice becoming more personal, more vulnerable. 8 years ago, I was told I did not belong in this industry because of how I looked. I was told I was not attractive enough to represent a company at the level they needed. That moment could have ended my career. Many people in similar situations do have their careers ended. But I want you to understand something important. That rejection was not about me. It was about a broken system, a toxic culture that valued the wrong things. Sarah looked around the room, making eye contact with individuals scattered throughout the crowd. Every person in this room has value that has nothing to do with their appearance. You are here because of your talent, your dedication, your contribution. You are here because you bring something unique and valuable to our work. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. Never let anyone make you feel that you need to change who you are to deserve respect and opportunity. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time, sustained. Sarah saw people crying, saw people hugging each other, saw the kind of emotional response that comes when people feel truly seen and valued. As the applause died down, Sarah continued, "We have also learned something important here. We have learned that people can grow and change, that someone who has made terrible mistakes can learn from them and become better, that redemption is possible when we create space for it." She looked toward the back of the room where Marcus stood, applauding along with everyone else. 3 years ago, when I took over this company, I made a controversial decision. I kept on staff the person who had fired me, who had treated me cruelly, who had damaged this company through poor leadership. Many people thought I was being foolish or too forgiving. But I believed then, and I believe now, that growth is possible. That we can build a culture where people learn from their mistakes rather than being defined by them forever. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the attention, but also grateful. Their eyes met across the room, and he nodded slightly, a gesture of respect and gratitude. "I am not asking you to excuse harmful behavior or to accept mistreatment," Sarah clarified. "Accountability matters. Consequences matter. But so does the possibility of redemption. So does creating pathways for people to become better. That is what we have tried to build here, a place where excellence is expected, where respect is required, but where growth is also possible." After the meeting, Sarah returned to her office to find a handwritten note on her desk. It was from Marcus, his handwriting neat and deliberate. "Sarah, 3 years ago, you gave me a gift I did not deserve, a chance to become better. Every day I work here, I try to honor that gift by being the kind of person, the kind of colleague, the kind of mentor that this company and its people deserve. Thank you for seeing potential in me when I could not see it in myself. Thank you for teaching me what leadership really means. Thank you for building a place where someone like me could learn and grow instead of just being cast aside. I will spend the rest of my career trying to live up to the example you have set. With profound gratitude and respect, Marcus." Sarah folded the note carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. It joined a growing collection of letters and notes from employees whose lives had been changed by the culture she had built. A young designer who had been told at her previous job that her disability made her unemployable. An older professional who had been pushed out of another company for being too old. A creative director who had been repeatedly passed over for promotion at other agencies because of his weight. Each note was a reminder of why this work mattered. Each story was proof that changing systems changed lives. That night, Sarah stood on her apartment balcony, looking out at the city where her journey had begun so painfully 8 years ago. She thought about all the young people out there who were being told they were not enough, who were facing discrimination and cruelty, who were wondering if they had a place in their chosen fields. She thought about the message she hoped her story sent them, that rejection does not define you, that cruel words from cruel people do not determine your worth, that you can take the worst moments of your life and transform them into purpose, that success built on integrity and respect will always outlast success built on ego and cruelty. The journey from that parking lot where she had cried 8 years ago to this moment had not been easy. There had been countless nights when she wanted to give up, when the weight of building something from nothing felt too heavy to bear. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if she was good enough, or if Marcus had been right about her after all. But she had persevered. She had built not one but 2 successful companies. She had changed an industry culture that had too long accepted appearance-based discrimination as normal. She had created opportunities for hundreds of people who had been overlooked and undervalued. She had proven that you could be both successful and ethical, that treating people with dignity was not a weakness but a competitive advantage. Most importantly, she had taken back her power from the person who had tried to take it away. Marcus Sterling had told her she was not enough, had tried to make her believe that her worth was determined by her appearance. She had spent 5 years proving him catastrophically wrong, and then 3 more years teaching him what real leadership looked like. She had won, but not through revenge, not by destroying Marcus or watching Sterling Media collapse. She had won by building something better, by creating workplaces where people like her could thrive, by proving that there was a better way to do business and treat people. As Sarah turned to go back inside, her phone buzzed with an email. It was from a young woman named Elena who had just been hired at Sterling Chen Media, a recent graduate from a state school who had been rejected by multiple agencies before Sarah's team recognized her talent. "Dear Miss Chen," the email began, "I wanted to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have heard your story about being fired for not fitting someone's idea of what success should look like. I want you to know that your story gave me hope during some really dark times. I was told by 3 different agencies that I should consider a different career path, that I did not have the look they wanted for their company culture. Each rejection made me believe a little more, that maybe they were right, that maybe I did not belong in this industry. But then I heard you speak at my university. You told us that our worth is not determined by other people's narrow judgments. You told us to create our own paths if the traditional paths were closed. Your words stayed with me. They kept me going. And now I get to work at your company, to learn from you and your team, to be part of something that values who I am rather than just what I look like. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for building this. Thank you for making space for people like me." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she read the email. She typed back a quick response, her fingers moving quickly over her phone screen. "Dear Elena, welcome to Sterling Chen Media. You did not get this job because of charity or kindness. You got it because you are talented and have valuable perspectives to offer. Never doubt that. What happened to you at those other agencies says everything about them and nothing about you. I am glad you did not give up. The industry needs your voice, your ideas, your unique perspective. I look forward to seeing what you will create here. You have always belonged. Never forget that. Welcome home. Sarah." She sent the email and stood for a moment on her balcony, letting the cool night air wash over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build and grow and lead. But tonight she allowed herself a moment of peace, of satisfaction, of knowing that she had taken her pain and transformed it into something that mattered. The woman who had been fired for being too ugly had returned as the boss. But more than that, she had returned as a leader who understood that true worth had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with character, integrity, and how you treated others.
She had not just won her personal battle. She had changed the battlefield entirely, had rewritten the rules of engagement, had proven that success built on dignity and respect was not just possible, but more sustainable and rewarding than success built on cruelty and exclusion. And that, Sarah thought, as she finally headed to
bed, was the sweetest victory of all. Not revenge, not watching enemies fall, but building something so good, so valuable, so transformative that it changed lives and gave hope to people who needed it most. That was leadership. That was success. That was worth every painful step of the journey that had brought her here. She fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, knowing that somewhere out there, someone was reading her story and finding the courage to keep going, to keep trying, to refuse to let cruel people define their worth. And tomorrow, she would wake up and keep building, keep creating opportunities, keep proving that there was always a better way if you were brave enough to forge it.